The Epistle of James. It's rather brief. The second one isn't brief, and it is in some ways difficult to hear. It's from Ecclesiastes. It's a call to us, though, a call to each of us to remember that we are human, that we experience this huge variety of emotions. Sometimes we label them bad or good, but really, they're all okay. It's okay. From James. Think of it as pure joy, my sisters and brothers, whenever you face trials of any sort. You understand that your faith is put to the test only to make you patient. But patience, too, has its practical results. It's to make you fully mature and lacking in nothing. And now from Ecclesiastes. But as I reflected on all this, I realized that the actions of the wise and the just are determined by God, even love and hate. We just don't know everything that awaits us. But we all share the same fate, the upright and the corrupt, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, the pious and the irreligious. As with the good, so with the sinner. As with those who take vows, so with those who are afraid to take them. One fate comes to all. This is the worst thing that happens to humankind. Yes, the human heart is corrupt and filled with madness all our life, and then we die. At the same time, at least have hope. After all, a live dog is better than a dead lion. The living are conscious of living, but of nothing. They have no further reward, and even all memory of them will be forgotten. Their loves, their hatreds, and their envies have died with them. Never again will they take part in anything done under the sun. So, go, eat your bread in merriment, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God already judges your work. Always wear white. Don't spare the ointment on your hair. Enjoy life with someone you love. All the illusory days of life allotted you under the sun. All these days, this is your lot in life. This is the work you are truly supposed to do under the sun.
You know you're in trouble if people are already coughing before you get up to speak. Most people, when they run across Ecclesiastes, sometimes it's in seminary, they haven't really looked at the Bible that much before that. And the question is, what in the heck is this doing in the Bible? It's so different than anything else. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And chasing after the wind. That doesn't sound very Orthodox Presbyterian, does it? I've always suspected that what happened was somewhere around this time when Alexander went into India and came back with the Hindu people in scriptures and Buddhist people in scriptures, that there was this huge, almost like an earthquake that happened. And all of a sudden you find a different kind of mysticism popping up. But it's incredibly important to realize that this is not really pessimism. I know that's very hard to believe. When they talk about under the sun, there was this kind of a view that above the sun, everything's perfect. And below the sun, it's a balance. Everything is up. It needs to be able to fall. That beneath the sun was kind of a bellows. And you can find happiness within that bellows, but you can't control the bellows. As depressing as it may sound at first, means the preacher, and you have to figure he didn't have a very large church. But here is a preacher who loves us enough to disturb our comfort zone. We don't realize how much of our pain comes from staying in the comfort zone. How much of our misery comes from comparing the real world that we live in with an imaginary world that we've made up in our head of the way things should be, the way things could be. Sometimes situations we could deal with and cope with become impossible because we're wishing for a better world, a different world. What the preacher is going to do is say that reality is just fine. Sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's unfair. You have to be radically honest about it. Because when we make up the imaginary world, we say all the good girls and boys are going to go to lollipop land for eternity. All the bad boys and girls will have an eternal spanking. What the preacher's saying, when I look around the world, that's not what I see. Sometimes I see evil seems to help people get ahead. Selfishness, cruelty, sometimes under the sun, succeeds for a time. Going to call us to happiness under the sun that's based on something that doesn't change, that isn't a part of fate. He believes there's something deeper. Unfortunately, the church has been willing to let people live in very childish worldviews. And we get in life, and life isn't like what we were taught. And we think there's something wrong with us. And we try desperately to do something better, something different. Why am I being punished? The preacher is saying, that's not you, that's reality. And believe it or not, you can find peace and joy and happiness and worth within the real world. You don't need an imaginary world to get where you're needing to go. In fact, there are problems when we try to live in our imagination. If you're like me, you were taught the idea that death is kind of optional. Right? I mean, it's happening to other people. I see that. I get it. Theoretically, I know I'm on the menu. But when I talk, I say, if something ever happens to me. And that tells you I haven't absorbed it. Right? I'm not really living on planet Earth. I've got a cartoon world I'm living in. The preacher is saying the deadliest place you can be sometimes is your comfort zone. And he loves us enough to pop the balloon that keeps disappointing us time and time again, that keeps disorienting us time and time again. There are precious people all around us, he is saying. Or maybe she. There's a lot of theories that the preacher is female. But he's not saying give up on life. He's saying grab every moment. Eat, drink. Be merry with the person you love. Do the work with all of your heart. Because nothing lasts forever. And enjoy this moment. Come into this present moment. To do is give us a foundation for happiness that's based on the worst case scenario. Now think about that. If you can be happy in the worst case scenario, then happy times will be easy. But when you've based your happiness, when you calibrate your happiness on good times, what happens when the wheel turns and you're left disoriented? So what the preacher is doing is giving us a gift, a very painful gift. But this way, the pain is temporary. The other way, the pain can last your lifetime. If we build our foundation on reality and not what we want, when what we want comes around, we can still enjoy it. There's nothing that keeps us from not enjoying it. But we realize the wheel keeps turning. In Eastern thought and in mystical Western thought, the idea is to get past the dualities. I think that's what the preacher is trying to do here. I know that at Christmas time, which takes place at the solstice, if you hadn't noticed, and what I think Christian mystics did was something very interesting. Most cultures had their celebrations of life in the spring, and then the kind of grieving and mourning of death in the winter. What the Christian mystics did was to turn that on its head. In the heart of winter, you celebrate the birth of the Savior, the dancer, the human one. Then when everything is blossoming, you have the reminder, nothing lasts forever. So enjoy it, but don't think you can hold on to it. Life is a wheel. It's a song, and you have to keep singing. The change takes place. That's what it is. We're going to look at a song today that is very good at shattering the dualities. O Little Town of Bethlehem has these great lines. Christmas is filled with great lines. A virgin mother. What's more Zen than that? A light shining out of the dark streets. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. How silently the precious gift is given. I mean, this is coming from a Zen master. And at Christmas, we feel that, right? At Christmas, we can all be mystics without ignoring what the world really is. So what I always hope is we can use Christmas and use these great hymns to understand what Christianity really means year-round. The story, it reminds me a little bit of the turbulence of St. Andrews. Late in the week, they haven't got their worship stuff together. Of course, they're pretty good. We're not together on Sunday either, so it's like. But this is O Little Town of Bethlehem. This is the person that wrote the tune. He's the choir director. He says, as Christmas of 1868 approached, Mr. Brooks told me that he had written a simple little carol for the Christmas Sunday school service. And he asked me, this is for Sunday school service, and he asked me to write the tune to it. The simple music was written in great haste and under great pressure. We were to practice it the following Sunday. Mr. Brooks came to me on Friday and said, Redner, they weren't real close apparently, Redner, music yet to O Little Town of Bethlehem? I replied, no, but that he should have it by Sunday. On the Saturday night previous, my brain was all confused about the tune. I thought more about my Sunday school lesson than I did about the music. But I was roused from sleep late in the night, ring in my ear, and seizing a piece of music paper, I jotted down the treble of the tune as we now have it. And on Sunday morning before going to church, I filled in the harmony. Neither Mr. Brooks nor I ever thought the carol or the music to it would live beyond the Christmas of 1868. Isn't that amazing? Have you ever said to yourself, if I just knew my life made a difference, my efforts made a difference, then I could be happy, no matter what happens? If I knew my life was changing things, that I could make a difference. this dichotomy of what we hope and what we fear. The poet is going to try to help us get beyond that. Many of the great cynics of the ancient world tried to pop the bubbles of arrogance and complacency. Diogenes, we told this story in Sunday school, lived at the time supposedly of Alexander the Great. Now, it's sort of like scripture stories. It's like you don't really know if this stuff happened, but that's not the point, right? It may be legendary, but this says Alexander the Great found the philosopher, Diogenes, looking attentively at a pile of human bones. Diogenes explained to Alexander the Great, the most powerful person in the world, I'm searching for the bones of your father, but cannot distinguish them from those of a slave. Diogenes said, what use is a philosopher that doesn't hurt anybody's feelings? Right? Because as long as we're comfortable, we're probably not growing. There are some people who love us enough to push us and make us comfortable. The easy gig on a Sunday morning is just to inspire you and to make you feel good. Right? And you feel good on Sunday morning for a short period of time, and then you go out into a week that doesn't look like anything like what they were talking about on Sunday. The preacher is taking us to a deeper place. The most powerful person in the world at this time may have been the Pharaoh. And they believed that because of their power, that what they did would last forever. And they were mummified, thinking that they would rise up and have all this power waiting for them. They didn't know they were just turning themselves into Slim Jims. You know, the great chariot wasn't coming. They're still there. Was that inappropriate? What's that? Okay. Okay, the jury will strike that from the, erase it from the. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. This is talking about the child being born. Now, Mary is singing a song of revolution, and that's what you don't see in the Christmas story unless you look up the verses that she's quoting. She's saying this child is going to bring the mighty low and lift up the wretched of the earth. It's as political a message as you can get, but it's coded because you don't last long if you talk about revolution in a Roman colony. So you have these scriptures and you have little Mary, and it's called the Magnificat, and everybody thinks, oh, she's so sweet. It's with Mary. Right in the story. She's a prophet. And she's talking about changing the world. But it's a different kind of externally. The hearts are being changed. The minds are being changed. But it's going to look the same when Jesus dies. Maybe there were angels on the roofs. Maybe bodies got up and walked around. But I doubt it. The world looked the same to them as your life looks to you. But what they're saying is that magic is there in your life. That life that can't be crushed. The hope that can't be taken from you. So people go out into the world and they try to make it better. Not because they know for sure that's going to happen in their lifetime. But because that's how they're fully human. That's how their heart song can be expressed. What mystics have said through the ages is happiness, joy, doesn't come from something external that you grab. It's a balance of the human heart. And in the song, it's the balance between fear and desire. When we find that peaceful place between them, and we can't do that much of the time. This isn't saying never desire, never be afraid. You can't do that. Remember, the way home is in the depths of your own heart. When you stop pretending life is different than it is. So one of the things we say to ourselves, if I knew my life was going to make a difference, then I could be happy. Another thing we say is, if I only could just see the sacred one time. I don't know how many times as a kid I used to say this. God, just show yourself. One time, that's all it'll take. Right? Just come walk into the room. I don't know why you're playing hide and seek. Is it too much to ask? What the preacher's telling you is that you can't see your source because you're coming out of it. And when we want the world to be different than it is, it's almost impossible to see the truth. You understand what I'm saying? When you want the world to be different, when you've been taught as a child that truth is this story that the preacher taught you, and it'll turn out okay because that's what you want. And what you want, if you pray for it hard enough, if you wish for it hard enough, and give your 10%, it's a little caveat. You plant your seed in this ministry. I mean, you've heard it all before. And life doesn't look like that. It doesn't cooperate. This preacher is being brutally honest with us. But what he's saying is, it's just like in the dark, when you first go into a room and it's been light outside and you're down in the dark, it looks like there's nothing there. When you get very still and very quiet, there's a light shining in the dark. You can see physically. C.S. Lewis said, it's not what you see. The sacred is not what you see. It's that by which you see. You can't pull your source out any more than you can pull your brain out to see how you think. Right? You can't pull the batteries out of a flashlight and look at it with the flashlight. But you can live out of it. You can feel it. You can know it in the sense of that you're an expression of it. Last thing that we sometimes say is, if I could just get this one wish granted, then I know I could be happy. Or if I could see one time something pure and beautiful and not mixed in any kind of way. This morning there was a beautiful sunrise. Pink and purple and all that kind of stuff. So I thought I would be a bad person, and which is a choice I make a lot of times, seeking the sunrise. And say, if that cloud was over there, it'd be so much more beautiful. If there's just a little more pink, a little less. But we do that. We deprive ourselves of the beauty that is there, trying to get something that's a little pink or a little more purple, a little brighter. And yet there's plenty to give us joy right there. So the poet says, how silently, so God imparts to human hearts the blessings of heaven. When Christianity talks about sin, it means something very different to a mystic. To a lot of people, it means somebody ate an apple a long time ago and it's your fault. Sin simply means confusion, looking at the world as a dichotomy, the multiplicity, not seeing the unity of things. When we get quiet enough, the gift is always there. But you have to know, and at Christmas you can feel it, that it's not something you find externally, you give birth to it. There is no truth that you don't birth. If somebody gives you truth from the outside, it's going to crater. There is no beauty that doesn't come from your own art. And there is no goodness that doesn't represent you as a human being. Birth, but it's a birth that every person goes through. The symbols are true for everybody, everywhere, all the time. They're the deep truths of being a human being in the cosmos. To quote one saint, Bruce Springsteen, he says, pessimism and optimism are slammed up against the tension between them is where it's all at. It's what lights the fire. I think that's what the preacher is trying to say. Instead of saying, I like this, I don't like that, to realize that tension creates the music, the art, the beauty, if our heart is balanced. Albert Schweitzer, I made the mistake. I looked up the, well, maybe we won't be hearing Schweitzer. Nope. Schweitzer's not really that good. It's somewhere. I had problems the first service too. Springsteen. Slim Jim. I'm telling you, the guy's not worth listening to. But here's the point. When I first got to college, I spent a lot more time studying outside of classes than inside of classes. Historical Jesus by Schweitzer. And he crushed me by saying there is no evidence. There's very little archaeological evidence. And he reviewed all the things. He had this big, thick book. And basically it's saying that's not what it means. That's not what it's about. Trying to go backwards to find the truth isn't going to get you there. But one of the things he said is that music, remember he was a concert pianist, I think, and he went to Africa instead, but he took that beauty with him. And he said that our tears, our pain, our sorrow, all of those things are transformed by music into something that's still painful, but it's beautiful. And again, I think that's what the preacher is trying to say to us. The reason the preacher's in the Bible, I think, is because he's talking about a part of our experience that the rest of them don't want to see. That place where you can't get rid of the diagnosis. Then what do? And it's not your fault. It's not because you didn't have enough faith. Or any time life is unfair. He's saying the answer is not in an imaginary world somewhere else, but a deeper, more profound, intimate relationship with the real world as it is and as you experience it. You won't discover it from the outside in, but it's always available from the inside out to a tuned heart. If I have this quote, I will quote. Yep, it's there. This is the philosopher Seneca, who was asked to be the advisor to the Emperor Nero, which, talk about a bad gig. Right, you're not going to win that. You're not going to live through that assignment. But he said this. He said, true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is sufficient for one that so wants nothing. The greatest blessing of humanity are within us all and within our reach. The wise are content with their lot, whatever it may be, not. The people in the first service sometimes don't get to hear the ending of a sermon because a lot of times I don't know it. I think I know it. I started doing the sermon, I realized, okay, that's not really closure. This is what occurred to me. And I faked it as the benediction, but this is really the conclusion. What the preacher said, is that it? Yeah, it's probably. Yeah, it's too late. What's that? Yeah, I got that. Thank you. What the preacher says is, go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart. This translation says, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments always be white. Let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy your life with the ones you love. In our sense, it means it's its own purpose. You weren't sent here to get somewhere else. So leave each day as fully and completely as you can. Now here's the conclusion that the first service didn't get. So we'll be charging more for the second service. Not really. The peace that Christ talks about does not mean that you will never be confused, depressed, angry, or even addicted. What it means is no matter what you go through, beneath the polarities and the dualities, it means there is always at the center of your life and your being, always a way home to joy. I invite you now to your own reflection on these words.